Fresh off the Benghazi hearing last week, we got a pretty high-level guy to reflect on it. Richard Boucher is spending some time at Brown University. He's a name for wonks and pundits and policy people that probably rings familiar. He has been a spokesperson for secretaries of state for 6 of those administrations, beginning with Madeleine Albright all the way through Condoleezza Rice. And I'm honored to have him here tonight to talk about what he saw last week with Hillary Clinton and the process and the whole thing regarding what you might think is a legitimate investigation or a political hit campaign. Interested to see what he has to say about that. Welcome in to My State of Mind. Thank you for tuning in on this Monday. I'm feeling very good because the Giants are 4-3. You cocky Patriots fans, you got away with one yesterday. Just saying. To the rundown we go. We know a couple of things that the governor is trying to emphasize on the Newsmakers program, a show that you should not be missing when Ted and Tim get together with Newsmakers on Saturdays and Sundays on WPRI and Fox Providence. By the way, you can hear the audio version of that show on WPRO on the radio Sunday night at 6:30. The headline that kind of brings all this together today, issues linger on the toll proposal, but Speaker Mattiello has been leaning toward acquiescing to the Gina wish that we put tolls up in this state to help finance a $500 million bond that will be more than $1 billion by the time we're done paying for it, all to get the infrastructure in better shape and the roads and bridges, more specifically the bridges, more specifically the 610 connector bridges. What bridges? Exactly. It's a highway that's got, anyway. She was chatting about it on Newsmakers.
We have to do something. We can't wait anymore. We have procrastinated for years, and we have the worst bridges in America. One of the things I like about the tolling, as we've proposed it, the majority of the burden falls on out-of-state truckers. So right now, every time an 18-wheeler from another state comes through Rhode Island, they're getting a free ride. They use our roads, they abuse our roads, and they pay nothing. We're one of the only states.
You know, the idea that they abuse our roads is a little bit much, okay? These are legal vehicles that move commerce in America, FYI, Governor, just thought I'd let you know that. But we'll be the only one of the states in America that will have an exclusive truck toll, by the way. She fails to point that out. And what we also know, which she continues to emphasize, is that the taxpayers will never be touched by this financial program. Last I checked, most people who drive cars in this state are taxpayers. And when the nut's not cracked and there's not enough toll money via the trucks that are trying to bypass the tolls here in this state, they'll have $60 million worth of gantries, meaning infrastructure, up over these bridges that they have not yet named. And guess who they're going to come for? You and me driving cars, who are also most likely taxpayers. All right. No good for the governor on that one. But good for the governor on this one. See, we're equal opportunity here. There's an important hearing going on this week. The Providence Journal reports that the overdose problem has gotten the attention of the governor, and she's got a plan to bring people together for some kind of intervention here. People who have been through this experience tell the same stories over and over.
I was a 32-year-old mother of 3, working at a very good job, living in suburbia, driving a minivan, and it didn't matter. People think that once a person has actively abused a substance or substances like myself, that they can never change. And the reality is that's not the truth.
Faces of people who are jammed up on opioid addictions right now are that, not necessarily the person that you perceive to be hanging around the street corner shooting up heroin up their arms. This whole thing has gotten crazy, and it starts with toothaches and backaches and available medicine and too much available medicine and folks not knowing what they're taking and doctors overprescribing and all those kinds of things. This is a good endeavor by the governor to try to get to the bottom of this, because unfortunately Rhode Island is leading the league in the percentage of opioid overdoses. There's another hearing scheduled for this week that I am scratching my head over. I'm trying to figure out what's going on with this one. WPRI.com has this headline: Commission on Preventing Sexual Assault on Campuses meets Monday. Now, believe me, as the parent of a female co-ed, that's redundant, I'm very concerned about the concept, but I have no idea what the House of Representatives plans on doing here. So my representative, Mia Ackerman from Cumberland, decided that because she got some pushback by experts on what you could legislate, she decided to create a bill to create a commission to figure out how she could stop campus sexual assaults. You know, sometimes government reaches too far. Sometimes government thinks it's the answer to everything. Sometimes you ought to spend some time trying to figure out how we're going to hold those at 38 Studios accountable before you just create another set of hearings for what will be. We got another warning. Yes, we got another warning. What'd you have for breakfast this morning? A headline. Now look, it's not like we didn't know. Okay, but now, do I have to, really? That business is going to shrink like nobody's, with the amount of media attention that's gone on to this 22 country study where they say you got an 18% chance, greater chance of getting colon cancer now. And hot dogs are in it too. You can have a couple at the ball game, but you know, mac and cheese with the hot dogs thrown in, not a good idea on a regular basis. Of course, you know, how many surveys and studies and health warnings that we had, and 3 months later, someone else comes up and says, oh, we're wrong about that one. We're wrong about that one. Make sure you get your colonoscopies, at least, on a regular basis. They're fun. I didn't even know it hit me. You know, I got wheeled in and wheeled out, and I said, when's my colonoscopy? And they said, you just had it. So, seriously, don't be afraid of those. And don't be afraid to elect a geezer to the presidency, because Hillary is 68 today. Happy birthday to her. Happy birthday to her. She's got we have headlines on that, don't we, somehow? Yep. I don't know why we got to pick on her pantsuits. That seems to me to be a little much by E. And you can tweet a happy birthday message to her as well. It's very nice. And before you think, oh, she's too old to be president, Donald Trump's a year older. And Ronald Reagan was older too. So that's that. She's getting sharper as she gets older. Your state of mind is important to us. Email us, tweet at us, call us, tell us what you think. Bob in Providence did.
Mayor Aloza is traveling all over the world for exactly what? What does Providence have to do with China and wherever else he's been traveling to? Yeah, I don't understand what he's trying to do in other countries when he should be concentrating on the problems in the west side, in the south side,
and the north end, and the south. I get it. Yeah. Well, he's been busy. He's been busy. He's been to Central America. He's been to London. He's been to China. He really needs to get to a good lawyer's office and figure out how he's going to figure out the firefighter dispute, which is going to cost them more money than he could ever have imagined. So I get it, Bob. When we come back, some perspective on the Benghazi hearings. I'm looking forward to this one. Stay with us. All right, welcome back in. I'm really looking forward to speaking with Richard Boucher, who's got a world of experience in the State Department. But unless you, some of us need to be briefed on what happened last week. Let's roll this.
Hour after hour, the former Secretary of State and current Democratic presidential frontrunner Hillary Clinton fielding questions about her handling of the deadly 2012 attack in Benghazi. The incident led to the death of 4 Americans, and Clinton says she agonizes over their lost lives.
I've lost more sleep than all of you put together. I have been racking my brain about what more could have been done.
Some suggest the purpose of the hearing was to unearth unanswered questions about the tragedy and if Clinton failed to provide adequate security measures after repeated requests for assistance. Others say it's nothing but a GOP-led witch hunt aimed at derailing Clinton's presidential campaign.
I'm not sure you want to answer that question, do you?
Not particularly.
Because that's not really your interest in coming here today. By the way, thank you for coming. And
good to be here.
I want to talk about what you're doing over at Brown before we're done. But Richard Boucher has a world of experience on this level, and dealing with media as a spokesperson for Secretary of State is a very big-time gig. You're not here necessarily tonight to answer the question as to whether this is a witch hunt or a legitimate investigation. But if you have somewhat of a thought on that, I got to pull something out of you.
I got to say, there have been, what I'm focused on is two things. One is there was an accountability review board, which is the formal mechanism with a high-level, Tom Pickering, one of our most senior diplomatic personnel, high-level ambassador, Admiral Mike Mullen, chairman of the Joint Chiefs. They chaired this formal review
Highly
board.
reputed guys.
Highly reputed guys came up with 24 recommendations, all things that should be done.
But never
and
interviewed
should
Hillary. I'm
should
told.
have been done.
And that's what the Republicans would
Frankly,
say.
I don't know for sure. But I'm not, you know, again, she's not the focus. The focus is in the systemic problems. And if you want to talk about Hillary, then that's a political thing in my book. So yes, I think after 5 hearings, you know, more sessions of testimony than there are hours in the day almost. And it's just really a very political thing at this point. Nothing new was substantively about how the attacks happened or the decisions that were made.
Well, I will say this, as somebody who, listen, I'm not a Hillary fan, but I have said that she might be the most qualified person for the presidency in this go-around, so I try to keep an objective mindset about her. Actually, I found, at least in the first few hours of the hearings, a lot to be learned in terms of process.
Yeah.
While she was fending off questions about what did you know, how did you do, what did a boom, 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 she was, I think, able, through a pretty prepared presence and a lot of homework, she was able to actually talk about the details of how Chris Stevens ended up becoming the ambassador to Libya.
Yeah.
And what she called a very old-fashioned, maybe 18th, 19th century approach that they took because of the lack of sophistication and communication that was available in Libya and in Benghazi specifically. Because it really was a makeshift ambassadorship and diplomatic setting. I mean, Tripoli is where the big show
Tripoli was where the real embassy was.
Right.
Benghazi was an annex even. It wasn't even a full-fledged consulate, a full-fledged building. Now, Chris had been there the year before. He'd spent 5 or 6 months there in Benghazi during the Libyan Revolution. He came in on a Greek freighter. He set up a shop there, and he did all the liaison
the former Secretary of State.
Oops, sorry about that.
And he handled, 5 or 6 months of liaison with all the local people fighting against Gaddafi. So he knew the town, he knew the people, as well as anybody did in the Foreign Service. And then he was in
wanted the
Tripoli.
gig.
And he wanted, oh, absolutely. This guy knew what he was doing. He was an Arab expert. He spoke Arabic. He knew these people in Libya. He had a lot of hope for the country, and he wanted to be there. And he was managing on the ground. I think there are 2 things that bother me about sort of the attitude of the hearing. I mean, one is that somehow Washington, whether it's the secretary or anybody else, is supposed to be fixing this stuff with a 10,000-mile screwdriver every moment of every day. His call was to go to Benghazi. His call was to stay in that building and do what he had to do. Now, we make these decisions all the time as ambassadors, but it's the ambassador's decision. He made a call. It turned out very badly. But it was his judgment, and frankly, he was the best qualified to make that judgment. He knew what he had from Washington, he knew what he had in terms of intelligence, and he knew the people he was going to be meeting with. You can argue then afterwards, did the system provide him enough intelligence? Did the system provide him enough security? But I don't think the idea that she should have made some of those decisions is wrong.
Well, I give her a break on this in some ways, because what she's saying is, look, who am I to be an expert in security? I'm growing every day as a Secretary of State, but I'm leaving it to the security people to figure that whole thing out. The problem, and I think this review pointed out in 29 suggestions, many of which she says she implemented or was on her way to implementing, that there's a communication problem all the way up the line. That she did not, that reportedly, she did not know that he was looking for help and looking for security is tragic, don't you think?
Yeah, it is tragic, and obviously if she had known about these problems, she could have intervened, because the systemic problems of coordination between the policy people and the security people, the decisions that were made about having a place in Benghazi, which was still an incredibly dangerous place, but not having it have all the protection that a regular consulate or embassy would have. I mean, those kind of decisions, they're security decisions, but she's responsible for the coordination inside between the different parts of the State Department. She's responsible for making sure all the people are bringing all the facts to the table.
And to be objective, again, I think, you know, everyone thinks they're objective when they're saying they're objective. Judge as you will, but I think she's taken the hit on the security thing. She's more or less said, "Look, okay." Yeah. I think the thing that bothers most Americans, and certainly is the red meat for, not that we can eat red meat anymore.
Yeah, I was going to say, I had a bacon sandwich.
You know, don't you feel it? Yeah. I think the thing that bothers most people in the red meat here is the story that was told after the tragic loss of these guys. And that's the politics of Washington that is really a mess. The president's running for re-election. They send Susan Rice out for the Sunday shows 5 days later to talk about the whole, you know, video thing. And I still don't get a good feeling that we're getting the straight answer on, or at least a mea culpa for it. No one's really apologized for playing politics with the answer. Do you feel that way?
I feel like they got the wrong answer. But I've been spokesman, you know, for 6 different secretaries of state. I've been on the front lines of some of these things when something happens and you're trying to respond immediately to the people in the press that are asking you. Now, Rice was out 4 or 5 days later with only, you know, she was half right, half wrong. You know, the best description of what happened there, what actually happened on the ground that I've ever seen was this exhaustive New York Times story, David Kirkpatrick at the end of December 2013. And he says it was not Al-Qaeda, it was local militia, and local militia who both used and ginned up sort of wider demonstrations in order to, as they went in for their attack. That story, well, took the New York Times a year to get. I would have hoped that we would have known at the time that between the CIA presence and the embassy presence, we'd have a better feel. But they weren't watching the local militias the way they were watching the Al-Qaeda.
But during this time frame, Hillary is banging out a couple emails saying, "Listen, I got terrorists on my hands here," and she's dismissing the video thing. Yeah. So it just seems to me that, but this is not just on Hillary Clinton; it's on the president as well. Right?
Well, it's an administration that couldn't get their act together in terms of bringing all the facts into one place.
Because of circumstances or because of political strategy?
I don't see what they get out of being wrong on TV. I mean, I've been wrong on TV. I don't know if you have, but it ain't no fun.
I've never been wrong on TV.
I'm sure, but you go out there, you say something, and you know, it's not just the world knows when you're wrong. Your friends know when you're wrong. Your boss knows when you're wrong. You're very careful not to do that. And I am surprised that 4 days later they hadn't brought the pieces together, and what she knew and what Susan Rice knew and what the president knew and what the CIA knew didn't come together. But what do they get politically out of telling different stories? They embarrass themselves. And so I don't see any political motivation whatsoever for it.
When we come back, what's he teaching the kids at Brown? And what's it like to be in a shop like this? Stay with us. Richard Boucher is a former spokesperson for 6 secretaries of state. And how long are you here in town with Brown?
3 or 4 months.
Good, because I'm going to beg you to come back to talk more shop, because this is fascinating stuff. But give me, having worked for so many, give me in a word or two what the atmosphere is like at the State Department on a day-in, day-out basis.
You know, it's still a big bureaucracy. And so the people working trade negotiations, their lives won't be affected at all if there's a crisis going on in Libya or Pakistan or somewhere else. The people that have that regional focus or counterterrorism focus or security focus are suddenly, the hair's on fire and they're running around. So it's kind of a weird place sometimes, that particularly, when there's really something going on. Now there's the operations center where everything comes together, and whatever happens, it goes there first. And anybody wants, I've been in positions where I had to get through to the Secretary of State right away. I didn't have her phone number. I called the operations center, and they put me through immediately to the Secretary, wherever he or she was in the world. And that's, they're kind of the hub for that sort of stuff.
Having the spokes for the Secretary of State is a pretty heady gig, huh?
Yeah, it's a pretty heady gig because you get involved in everything. It's sort of like being on the other side of the camera, but it's the same thing as being a journalist, because whatever's happening in the world, you got a piece of the action, and you've got to be on immediately when something happens. And it kind of is an adrenaline rush, but after you don't do it again for a while, it feels good not to do it.
Yeah, you don't miss it?
Not really, no.
Why?
I think I like the chance to think about events more and not to have to deal with them that morning. You know, when Saddam Hussein would give a press conference in Iraq, you know, 4 hours later I'd have to stand up in front of the cameras in Washington and say something. You know, you don't get a whole lot of time to reflect. So it's good to kind of be in a position where you can think about things, where you can ignore the chaff and try
You're
to
sitting
figure
in
out what
front of
the
a
kernel
national
is.
press corps that's covering the State Department, and you're going to be live on CNN and Fox and all this kind of stuff when things are breaking. You're sitting there making a presentation. Is there a little guy on your shoulder going, damn, I hope I'm right? I hope we're right about this stuff?
You learn very quickly to learn the difference between what you know and what you think you know.
And be clear about the difference.
And
when
be
you're
clear
talking
about the
it.
difference. And you don't say what I think. If it's something you think, you don't say it. If you know it, you can say it. But it's better to have people dump on you for not being able to say something than it is to say the wrong thing. But every now and then you do.
So errors of omission are better than errors of commission.
Yeah.
It's interesting because people I work with, I tell them errors of commission are better than errors of omission. But in your job,
It's better to have loved and lost or whatever. But this is a job where you get more, you get everybody in more trouble.
who was the most fun to work with?
The most fun?
Secretary of State, I'm talking about.
Probably Madeleine
from
Albright.
all the way up.
She had a personality. She had curiosity, a desire to do things. I probably admire Secretary Powell more than any others. I worked more closely with him. He had a solidity and a thoughtfulness and just a real gut instinct and common sense that nobody else I know has, except for my dad.
And he ended up having to go say that, yeah, we got some nuke material out there, and it seems like he hardly figures himself for it. Yes? No? In terms of Hussein, we got the yellow cake, the whole thing.
Yeah, we went through the February 5th presentation together. I mean, I was in all the prep centers, and if you see the TV shot, I'm sitting behind him. Yeah. We must have thrown out 90% of what we were given by the White House and the CIA.
Really?
And he threw out everything that we didn't have 2 or 3 sources for, threw out everything that he didn't think made sense in a clear way. And it turned out that, you know, that one bad apple spoils the barrel, that there was another 10 or 20% of the information we kept that was bad too.
You got to come back. I could spend all day with you. Give me a half a minute on the kids. Do you like them at Brown?
I love the students, and I love the way they make you think about things differently. When you're doing stuff, you're just doing it, and then when you go into the classroom, you've got to step back a little bit, learn how to explain it. And they ask the tough questions, the simple questions that are hard to answer.
Are you bullish on the future when you're talking to the college students?
Oh, absolutely. They're better than I was when I started in the Foreign Service. They're
Really?
better than I was in the end.
Appreciate the time you took. Valuable.
It's good to be with you.
Have fun at Providence.
Oh, it's a wonderful place.
Richard Boucher. When we come back, final words. Stay with us. I hope you enjoyed that high-level conversation. I mean, this guy has been inside the State Department for a long time, and we'll try to have him back from Brown University, Richard Boucher, and also to get him on WPRO, weekdays, noon to 3, of course. Tomorrow, the new Education Commissioner will be here. Seems like we've got a very different style and approach than the former Education Commissioner, but there is some percolating controversies on funding and concepts in education that he'll have to handle starting tomorrow night, right here on My State of Mind. Thanks for watching.